So the next tool we're going to use is really cool. And this is one of the very first tools that we're going to explore where you get a little bit more control over the tool and how it works. Not necessarily with the intensity, but the location. So the first thing we need to do is talk about selections. Within Photoshop, you can make selections, and then whatever changes you make, even options from the menu like doing auto levels and that kind of thing, will only affect the selected area. So you can make selections using any of the selection tools. Up here we have some geometric selection tools. So you've got like the rectangle tool, but if you click and hold, you can see there's also an elliptical where you can make circles or ovals, and then tools that select in a single row. And there are actually some cool uses for that, which we may explore a little bit later. Next to that, you've got the lasso tool, the polygonal lasso tool, and the magnetic lasso tool. All three of these select irregularly shaped areas. The lasso tool is totally freeform, so you basically just draw a selection. The second is polygonal, and that's where you just go click, 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 and it kind of connects the dots, and we're going to look at that. We'll explore that. And the magnetic lasso tool is really cool because it tries to automatically find the edges of elements within your design and select right along those edges. So you get a really clean selection of things. What we want in this particular lesson is the lasso tool. And what we want to do is get rid of this top left corner. So we're going to select this area and then tell Photoshop to sort of do some super magic and fill in that area with information that looks like the surrounding areas. So it tells Photoshop, look around the photo in this area, and then when you fill it in with stuff that looks like it belongs here. So it's kind of an automatic feature, but we need to make this selection first. So what we're going to do is just kind of make a quick little selection by just drawing around the area. And once you have an area selected, you're going to see these little black and white moving lines. Everybody calls them marching ants. There's probably some fancy Photoshop term, a selection marquee or selection area marquee or something like that, but everyone calls them marching ants. So remember that term. When you hear marching ants, that's what we're talking about. And if you look at it, it looks a heck of a lot like marching ants. So it's a great name for things. So what we want to do now that we've got our selection is we want to go to Edit and then choose Fill. And from this menu, we want to just make sure that under Contents, it says Content Aware, and then we click OK. Boom. And Photoshop does some magic, and we can see that it filled in with a textured fill that looks a lot like the texture of this wall. So one thing that's really important to know once you make a selection is how to unselect it. And you can go to the selection menu and choose deselect, but I don't want you to do that. I want you to memorize this shortcut. And it makes a lot of sense. It's deselect, so it's Control or Command D. So really, really easy to remember that one. So I'm going to do Control D. It's Command D on the Mac. And then I look at my wall, and guess what? It's pretty believable. It's not perfect. Like, I can tell looking at it that I've got all these lines dividing the layers of bricks, but I don't see one here where it should be. It's at the same interval and it's not there. There are ways to manually go in and fix this, which we're not going to discuss right now, because the bottom line is that this is just in the background. It's way off in the corner, and I don't think that anybody's going to notice it. A big part of Photoshop work is making sure that you take care of what people will be able to see and what's distracting. But if it's a small, sort of inconsequential thing in the background, let it go. Cover it up, let it be good enough, and then call it good enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to try getting rid of this shadow down here at the bottom with our lasso tool and the content aware fill. So I'm going to just kind of make a selection. And I try to make my selections, by the way, relatively close to the shape of what I am wanting it to fill. And then I go to Edit, Fill, Content Aware. You know, and I've done this video a couple times just hoping that it would give me a bad fill. And the reason is that I wanted to show you how to fix it. And it seems like the Photoshop team's done a great job at making this tool work so much better. And so I'm going to deselect, and look, you just can't even tell at all where the selection was that we made. It's really very clean. I'm going to do Control Z just to show you again, and I'm going to do Control Alt Z, and that's Command Option Z on the Mac. And what that does is that steps farther back. if I just do Control Z, you can see that it goes back and forth between my previous step and the last step. If I do Control Alt Z, it will go back in time. You see how it's reselected up here? And look, there's my tear again that I already replaced. So Control Alt Z, Command Option Z on the Mac continues to step backwards. You can also find those here in the menu. Under Edit, Control Z is to undo the state change, undo the last change. And then if you do it again, it undoes the undo. And it just keeps going back and forth between those two steps. But if you do Alt Control Z or Command Option Z on the Mac, then it automatically will keep going backwards, backwards, backwards in history. I can also go forward. Shift Control Z, which is Shift Command Z on the Mac, will move forward. So I can do Shift Command Z and move forward until all of my fixes are replaced. So really helpful tools to know. Those are good shortcuts to remember. The main ones that I know, I often forget the step forward, but I always remember my Control Z or Command Z on the Mac, and then my command for stepping backwards to keep going back. So keep that in mind as a really good shortcut to know. Now here what we're going to do is we can just sort of grab some of these other sections. I do not want you to fix this one here because it doesn't work so well. I'll demonstrate for you really quick though. I just realized, let's do that. So I'm going to make that selection, edit, fill, tell it okay. And it did a decent job, but look at what we've got. We've got it just kind of replacing over the arm here, and it's just too obvious that there's something not right about this section. It is distracting. It also took our wall and made our wall very much kind of going through our dress. So here, that's a perfect example of when you try a fix and it doesn't work, you just do Control Z or Command Z and fix it. I need to do one more step because deselecting the area was a step. So I do Control Alt Z and there we go back to my original. And then I can do Control D or Command D on the Mac to deselect the area. So you can try and fix your shadow in this top area up here. I could even go into the ground here. Like I see this tear. I can try and make sure I avoid the toes. And then I can try and fill there. But the next tool that we're going to talk about, oh, and I was hoping that it would put a toe down there. Darn it, they fixed the content to where fill that it just works perfectly every time. I guess that's not a bad thing, but I do want to show you in the next video how to get in and dial into very specific fixes and how to fix all these little tears like we just saw. It doesn't work very well. Content aware fill does great for a large area where it's kind of in a big field of similar texture. But when you want to get in here where everything is changing, where I've got the arm in the background I need to be aware of, when it crosses over this part of the dress right here where you see this black line, we're going to want that to be fixed. To get rid of this as it transitions across all of these different changes, we're going to need a better tool, and we're going to talk about that in the next video.